Welcome everyone, my name is Darren Kuzma and this is another webinar of Mind the CRAIC, a series of webinars that we're doing covering life improvement tools or your online life hacks as based on the works of L. Ron Hubbard. So currently we're doing a short series on motivation. In some previous webinars we discussed the definition of motivation, about getting into action and doing things, and the willingness or the desire or the reasons to get into action. And today's topic is, are you controlling your life? So before we get into that, I just want to check in with Zoom, which I'm live on a chat here. I have also on the other platforms, there is a host, Michelle. So she'll be taking your comments and things that you want to originate or questions that you might have for me as we're going through this, and she'll pass them through to me live here on this Zoom chat. So if you are with me on Zoom, give me a thumbs up, give me a wave, anything to say hello and greet me and let me know that you're alive and paying attention there. If you have any stories or anything you'd like to contribute, I really think it is important to share, and it is the reason that we're doing this as a webinar rather than simply online video content, because having yourself look back on the past activities and things that you have done, when you get new information, comparing that to expand your own reality and looking to see whether it fits and will complement or improve the situation that you're currently in, or just considering it, you might find it goes against what you're interested in, but at least you're considering new realities and new viewpoints, which I think is a very important thing. So as a webinar, we got a hello there. I'm going to say to just saying hello to someone there on Zoom. So if you're on the other platforms, go ahead. Michelle will correspond with you and pass information over to me as we're going along. Okay, so as I mentioned before, the content that I'm covering is based on the works of L. Ron Hubbard. I'm choosing within the vast body of knowledge that is all the writings of Scientology, the things that I feel are important to highlight. Some of the books from which I'm drawing material from for this is related to Scientology Fundamental Thought and the book Dianetics. Two very interesting books, as I hope you'll see, cover some very exciting stuff on the subject of motivation. And so myself, what do I have to do with motivation? Well, aside from working with many people on a one-on-one basis over many, many years, in the number of thousands, getting people to do things, which I think is at the core of motivation. Motivation isn't just the gaining of knowledge or the passive kind of receipt of things. It's actually the active doingness. It's the getting going of a project, of an activity, of the doingness in something. And not only have I done things myself which did require motivation, consistent and persistent doingness, things like running marathon distances, training for and competing in triathlons, there's some of the physical pursuits. I've definitely seen many patterns of things emerge as you're trying to get someone out of an unmotivated state into a motivated state. So it's from my own experience combined with what I have learned from L. Ron Hubbard that I present to you this evening. Okay, so I like to start off with some definitions. Good, so hello on Instagram. We've got some people watching there from overseas, I believe, so it's great to have you join me. If you have any questions, please feed them in through the platform that you're on, and Michelle will get them to me. So here we go. We're going to start with definitions, because I think it's always a good thing to orient yourself to the subject by looking at a definition of the word, and then we can see how that relates to the content. Okay, so we're looking at control. Since we're looking at, are you controlling your life? Let's look at the definition of control. So from the Oxford Dictionary online, the power to influence or direct people's behavior or the course of events. I'll give you another one. To determine the behavior or supervise the running of. So you see in both those definitions there, we've got this a power or an influence or an ability to determine behavior or actions, really. So it's the determining, the having the idea of what it is to be and making it be the case over a course of events or someone's behavior or the running or the activity of. So we see how that relates to motivation in that way. Okay, there's also a management definition that I want to give you that just gives another slant on it, and it says the function of the system So there's a system, and there's a function of that system that adjusts operations as needed to achieve the plan. So there's a plan, and there's a system, a thing within that system that adjusts it. So you've got this whole idea of being able to determine or direct the use or the action of something to achieve a plan. And I think that's an important thing, since we are looking at motivation and there's usually goals involved. Okay, now in addition to that, L. Ron Hubbard had this to add. Almost the entire subject of control is summed up in the ability to start, change, and stop one's activities, body, and one's environment. So that's pretty interesting. To start something, get it going, to change it if it's going in a direction, to shift that direction it's going, and if something is moving, to then stop it. And that could apply to anything from a pen. Can I control this pen? Can I start it? Can I get it moving in a direction? Can I change its direction if it's going? And can I stop it and put it at rest? So that is a very mechanical definition that breaks things down really into its most basic anatomy. Okay, so we've got the whole idea there of control. If I just sort of summarize that, is that there is some determination, some ability to change something in its state from not moving to moving, from when it is moving to change its direction of moving or its progress, and then to stop something if something is in motion or something is occurring. And it has to do with behavior or actions as a sort of broad area, but activities, body, and one's environment as in the definition from L. Ron Hubbard. Okay, so if any of you have examples of that definition or those definitions of control and how they influenced your motivation or your thoughts on motivation and control, put that into the chat. I'd really like to hear from you to see what your thoughts are and how they are sort of kind of going together. So I'm going to continue because, and you may have heard me say this before, but I've often said the stress that you create for yourself, the stress you make, is better than the stress you take. So when you are looking at control, or who is determining your actions, having you determine your own actions rather than someone else determine your own actions, I think is always a more sane and better sort of state to exist in. Now the same would go therefore for discipline. It's way better when you discipline yourself than if you wait until you get out of line and someone else has to discipline you. I think that's definitely an inferior state to operate in. And you could also say the same then just of plain activities, right? If you're the one that determines your activity or you decide on what it is that you're going to do, okay, I'm going to decide my room is in a bit of a mess. I'm going to decide the action of cleaning it rather than having someone else to have to point it out to you and say, dude, you need to clean your room. So being in control yourself, being the determiner of the actions that you do, I think is definitely a more sane state of operating. So, who or what is controlling your life? The ability to influence the actions of, right? Start, change, stop is what we're talking about. So these days there's many things attempting to influence us in this day, to determine our behavior. And even in vogue is the term influencer. I went to an awards night last year that was related to, I think, a magazine, and they even had the influencer of the year. So they gave an award to someone who was within society, and obviously social media was the platform from which they were launching their influence from. But you get the idea that this is a real commodity. Being able to influence is definitely a powerful commodity in today's society. So being an influencer. Now, when it comes to being influenced or being given a message or given information, I think it's totally fair to be given information. I just think that it's definitely smarter for you to be able to retain your own control, consider information from an influencer or from wherever it might be, and then determining what you want to start, change, stop. That's imperative. Okay, so what sort of things do we see in society that come from these influences or different things like that? Well, one of my favorite silly ones is food manufacturers, and you see this on their labels or in their advertising and things like that. And maybe it's hot and spicy mango flakes. Just made that one up, right? And it's like, you can put it on your burger, you can put it in your sandwich, you can put it on your breakfast cereal, you can feed it to your pets, you can sprinkle it around the room, take it to a wedding and use as confetti. You know, they just go overboard into the ridiculous and absurd kind of suggestions, and obviously their aim is to just have you use more of their product, because then you'll buy more if you like the product. So there is an idea behind that they just want to sell more, but sometimes it's very obvious and you can sort of see, and you know, they give a list of it's great for mums and dads and brothers and sisters and aunties and uncles, and the list just goes on. Obviously making suggestions, they hit you from all angles and basically advertising, you could say, is the main source of all this. All right, so you're getting hit with all this sort of thing in advertising. Now, advertisers, packages of goods that you buy, foods or whatever else, they don't just have these days this sort of stupid advisory things. They have warning labels as well. And I think perhaps that it has gotten to the point where maybe as a result of lawsuits or other things like that they end up with ridiculous labels on them, not just to suggest the use of it, but to warn against the disuse of something. You even get these things on your packets of peanuts now, warning, may contain nuts. Or on your iron it might say, warning, dangerous when hot. It could be another one I saw on a shirt I had one time. Do not iron shirt while wearing it. On a washing machine, do not put a person inside. All these sort of warnings that tend to make me think that we've gotten into a bit of a robotic culture. In other words, a robot does exactly what it is instructed to do and doesn't really have an autonomous way of thinking. Even if the program itself causes the machine to learn itself, it still has to receive instructions. And I think we have gotten and submerged a little bit into a robot kind of culture. So, I feel like I should warn you while watching this webinar, do not operate heavy equipment or use sharp objects. But I think that the people watching this don't really need to be warned of such things like that. But anyway, so this robot culture that has developed in society, I am going to talk about suggestions and how it relates to hypnosis a little bit later. But I want to go ahead with, because I think suggestion, you could even call the human race, or this era of living, you could call it the suggestion era, or the era of suggestion, where advertising and marketing, having taken place, have discovered certain mechanics of the mind and why suggestion works. Even hypnosis, as I said, works on that same sort of principle. So I'm going to talk about that shortly. One thing I do want to look at that we're definitely all very much involved with these days, more than we really want to be, because our work often relates a lot to it, is the rectangular screen, is the TV, is the device that we use and operate with, is that our search engines and our social media have curated advertising. In other words, I think it's a nice use of the word because the derivation of curate means coming from a curate, which was a priest or someone that took care of, and a derivation of the word curate is actually care. But I'm not sure how much care I actually feel when I'm having these ads and suggestions shown to me. I might search one time for a mechanic near me, and then after that I start seeing ads for various car dealerships and other car associated things. I much preferred when we didn't have cookies and I didn't have suggestions and I just got to search on Google for what I wanted. If I needed a car dealership, I just go onto Google. I know it's a search engine. I know it will give me what it is that I want. But now, when I do a search on Google, I tend to get a number of search results that are kind of curated or positioned towards other previous ideas or likes or searches that I've actually had, or things that I have bought, rather than presenting me all the base facts of information that I was looking for. So I tend to go with another search engine these days, because that idea of curating has kind of become a little bit like the fox saying that to the hens that he's going to make a chicken coop for them, and it's going to be all totally safe, when really he's just made a deal with the local snakes so that they can swallow down as many eggs as possible when the hens aren't around. Now, maybe that's a crude and sort of scathing analogy, but I think that there is nothing wrong at all with going back to how social media was, or how the search engines were at their inception, when you put in the terms and you search for something and you got all the list of things and you just refined your search if it was too broad. Now, I'm not immune to the irony in saying that, because I am, of course, benefiting right now from social media and the different platforms. We're going out on Facebook, we're going out on Instagram, we're going out on all of these different points to you. So I do understand the irony in the piece that I just gave you now. However, I think that having the ability to choose, or perhaps going back when advertising wasn't driving something, the monopoly, attempting to take the monopoly of the consumer currency, I think that is a much better environment to operate from. Now, of course, you always do have a choice. You can decide not to use that search, you can decide not to use social media and that sort of thing, but it's kind of like the selling your soul to the devil. There's a lot of benefits that you can get with it, but you are giving up certain other things. Anyway, moving on. So we have this curation of advertising. We have these cookies. Okay, so cookies, even cookies are a bit of an interesting term, It's like, would you like to accept these cookies? It's a nice little cute name that they give to the ability for them, for whoever it is presenting the web page, for them to sample your information, know what you're searching, know what your browser has been looking at, and they call it a nice little cookie. I guess it's the sort of thing that when kids grow up and they consider that they've got cookies, or they've got to accept cookies and that sort of thing, that it's kind of harmless. But as I said, I prefer to go back to the way things were before, because the suggestibility that comes with that, I think, is actually the wrong sort of influence. Now, I hope this doesn't offend anyone, but someone said to me that these days your computer is like a woman. They said, if a woman asks you for your permission to do something, you never ask why, just say yes. Because you'll get all sorts of reasons if you ask why they want permission to do something. And even if you do have time to listen to all the reasons, or to read through all the reasons, you won't understand anything. So I think that's a good analogy for how your relationship with your computer is these days, not necessarily that it has to exclusively relate to women. Anyway, getting back to motivation and suggestions. So YouTube, any online sort of viewing platform at the moment, often you watch one video and it will suggest something. And I remember a person saying to me the other day that they were getting motivated, and they were watching more motivational videos. And I said, that's great. I said, how's it going? They said, yeah, it's good, because I'm having a thinning out of all the, the cat and dog funny videos, and all the other how-tos and all the various other things that I was looking at. There's not so many of them, but now I've got so many suggestions of motivational videos, and they also sound so great that I've got no time to do anything else except for sit down and watch videos. So that brings me pretty much back full circle to what I was alluding to at the start, and what I've mentioned in another webinar, is that motivation has a lot to do with doing things. It is, you could say, the end result of motivation. The end result of motivation isn't that you're sitting there in your chair and you're thinking all sorts of wonderful thoughts. The end result of motivation is that you have a thought and it gets into action. You end up doing something with it. So, for any of you that are watching, if you've tried any techniques to motivate yourself, and you've found that you've had your motivation sucked away by suggestions, or you've had an idea to do something and you've gone onto YouTube, you've gone onto your search engine, and the initial idea that you had has then been changed because of what you have seen and been stopped in your tracks, I would be interested to hear. I certainly did fall victim to that in the past, having ideas and creating lots of different things. I thought that I would actually, this is many years ago when I was living in Australia, I would drive at nighttime in it was northern Queensland, so there's a lot of kangaroos around, and it was kind of in the bush. And at night time, quite often in the evening, I'd be driving, and the number of kangaroos that crossed my path that I didn't hit, it happened more often than not. And understanding the different, the hearing range of kangaroo, I thought that it might be a great idea to install some sort of a horn or some sort of a whistling thing that would be attached to your car so that the kangaroos could hear it from a distance, but it wouldn't disrupt humans. Anyway, having that idea and not being able to put it into action was simply because I had the idea and I was going to move with it, but then I got all these other ideas in from other people. So in the past, it may not have happened from the internet suggesting so many things or just inflowing so much, but it definitely happened when I listened to what other people said. So this concept of inflow versus outflow is something that L. Ron Hubbard talks about quite a lot. And so I'm going to discuss that shortly. So I'm just going to check in with Michelle before I go on. Michelle, if we have any people on any of the other platforms that got any stories to share, or if you're here with me on Zoom, if there's anything else that you would like to mention in regard to motivation, activities, or things that you've attempted, and you've gone to do something and they've been quashed, or that action has been stopped by you receiving some information or getting something or inflowing it. Just to clarify what I mean by inflow a little bit. So not only is it, you're reading something and there's labels, there's advertising, there's the information from other people, there is the content of whatever it is that you are watching on YouTube or on the television or whatever it is. There is a huge amount of inflow that's occurring, that's coming into you on a daily basis. So one of the principles that L. Ron Hubbard talks about is that inflow needs to equal outflow. Because the only way that you create your life, the only way that you put into the physical universe the ideas that you have in your head is not by inflowing something, it's by you outflowing. Now that could be speaking, it could be you writing, typing, sending emails, sending out any sort of communication, or putting something into the physical universe, lifting, moving, doing things, actions. That's you outflowing. So for you, in order for you to create your life, you have to be outflowing. And the principle is, if you're going to inflow, you have to outflow. And if you're outflowing, there does have to be some inflow. Aberration otherwise will then follow. Very important point. So when we look at this particular point of who's controlling your life, we see that there's a lot of suggestions that come from all sorts of things on the computer and all the world around you, which is all inflow. So if you're just in this regular activity or this pattern of just receiving inflow, and I know you've all experienced it at some stage, you've sat down to watch TV and you watch that one thing that you wanted to watch, or you watch that one video on YouTube that you wanted to watch, and the next suggestion comes up and you go, oh, that kind of looks interesting. It's supposed to. It was manufactured that way. And so you go, oh, let me just watch it again. Or let me watch this next thing. And then by the end of it, you've been sitting there for a period of time. Time has passed and you feel unmotivated. Why? Because you have inflowed so much that this regularity of inflow, when you're doing it a lot, then turns into a compulsion, and it actually has a bit of a deadening effect. So inflow must balance with outflow. So let's have a look and check in. And perfect. Okay, good. So I have a good question here, and this is, how does, within Scientology, how does L. Ron Hubbard relate the spiritual side of existence with something that perhaps is very simple and mechanical in the way that I'm explaining now? There's a doingness in life. Okay, we can see things. Here's a computer. It's got advertisements on it. Here's me. Then I'm doing actions and that sort of thing. Well, the one answer that I would give to that and how this relates to you as a spiritual being is the spirit isn't something that you can see. So it's not tangible to that degree, Whereas someone doing something or someone seeing something on television or YouTube or whatever it might be, that is tangible. You can see it. However, if we just do a simple experiment just for a moment, and you close your eyes and think of a cat. Now you see a picture of a cat. Now, where does that picture come from? The picture of a cat might be of a cat that you saw sometime in the past before. So there is a recording that you make. Now you, as a spiritual being, make of a cat, and you can recall that by looking at the picture. And the question I would ask for you is, when your eyes are closed and you're not letting any light into your eyes, what is looking at the picture? So close your eyes, have a look at a picture of a cat. What is it that's looking at the picture of the cat? Well, that's you. Now, you can't show that to someone else. Someone else can't see you looking at the cat. But that connection between you as a spiritual being and the physical universe has to do with your mind, and how your mind records things in terms of making pictures or mental image pictures, you could say is the interface between you as a spirit and the physical universe. There's something between that, and that is what these mental image pictures are. So when it comes to this concept of inflow versus outflow, if you have a spiritual being that is existing in a body, and all the physical recordings in the mind are just of pictures of inflowing, pictures looking, pictures looking, pictures looking, pictures looking, and it's just of inflow. Guess what happens to the mind? The mind is full only of content where there has been no action. There has only been receiving, receiving, receiving. And that deadens you as a spiritual being. So this is the principle. Inflow must be balanced by outflow. So if you are sitting there and you're only inflowing, then your mind is full of only inflow. You may have all these ideas of making your life, but if you're not actually doing anything in the physical universe, that interface between you and the physical universe will not ever get put into action. So for a greater explanation of what I just covered, hopefully that was sufficient for you, the book Scientology Fundamentals of Thought definitely will cover the parts of man and how these different parts, the physical universe, and perhaps your body, your mind, and you as a spiritual being, as L. Ron Hubbard called it, a thetan. You can call it a spiritual being, it's totally fine. But that relationship is definitely expanded upon in that particular book. So hopefully that is something that you have and that you can read that, and we'd definitely be more than happy to discuss that further. So anyway, I'm going to check over here because I have a story that's come through on Zoom. So I'm just going to have a read of this here. And good, okay. So I definitely had this myself, though I think I was lucky in a way because I'll tell you what the story is. So the story is basically as a child waking up in the morning and sitting down in front of the TV and watching cartoons and being energetic and ready to go and sitting there, and you have your breakfast and you sit down, you're watching the cartoons, but then after a period of time, come around 10 a.m. of sitting there watching cartoons for 3-4 hours, whatever it may have been, kind of feeling dead. And yes, and lazy. And I definitely have seen that in other people. But the one interesting thing that my brother and I did when we were young is that we very rarely sat down in front of the TV to just watch the TV. We also played Lego at the same time. So while we were watching something, or it was going on over in the background, we would be making something. Now, maybe that had something to do with my attention levels or problems that it maybe had later on, but I certainly was never one to sit for long periods of time in front of the TV because I would very much be aware at the end of that long viewing of things, the feeling of kind of being stultified, not really ready to go into action. It was more the opposite that would usually happen. I would watch something and I would get filled and motivated with something and then want to go and do it. Especially movies like Karate Kid, it was one of the best. Every time we would watch that, all we would want to do was go and fight and, like wax on, wax off and, paint the wall and all that sort of thing and just, pretend and mock the whole thing up with physical action. Anyway, as kids, definitely it's an important thing. This inflow must be balanced by outflow. Okay, good. So I'm going to move on to the next section here. So here we are, inflow versus outflow. Let me just go to my next page of notes here. Okay, now when it comes to social media, I have to put something in context, because I'm not saying that everyone that uses social media is going to go insane or is insane because they're just constantly inflowing. Because when you look at it, there are a lot of people that I know that use a lot of social media, but what are they doing? They're doing a lot of outflow. They're sending out information. They're originating their creative ideas. They're putting their creative ideas in the physical universe. Or they've been busy doing something in the physical universe, and that thing is then what they're posting on social media. I'm not talking about those types of activities as being unhealthy. I'm talking about definitely the person that sits there on social media and doesn't do anything except for consume the content, scroll through things, watch video, and doesn't actually do anything. That is definitely unhealthy. Okay, so now I'm going to get to the point on hypnotism. Hypnotism works on the same principle as the inflow and outflow idea. And I studied hypnotism in university, and you can look online, you can see all the latest scientific sort of resources and things like that, and it will all say that hypnotism works on the power of suggestions. Okay, we've spoke about suggestions coming from your social media, coming from your search engines and that sort of thing. They're giving you suggestions, and it's kind of slanted in a way based on your preferences that the computer thinks that you have, etc. But a suggestion is essentially something that is given by another to you, and you take it on and use it or not. So again, is that an inflow or is it an outflow? It is an inflow. So it's not very self-determined at all. And you can see how that therefore increases or contributes to that load of inflow that you're already dealing with from the physical universe, from people around you. This light, this energy, this sun, the cues and things like that. Even the whole body of what is called or referred to as time biology. What is happening at the various times of the day is an input to you. If you're watching, it's now known very broadly that if you're looking at your device late at night, the light that comes from the device late at night actually disturbs your sleep and disturbs all sorts of hormonal patterns in your body. So this whole habit of inflow, or filling your mind with no activity other than inflow, causes this numbing and this increase of suggestibility, which again is what hypnosis is. So if you look at being hypnotized, taking on a suggestion and using it, there has to be an ability for you already to be overcome in some way by inflowing things. You know, some people can't be hypnotized. Quite interesting. They haven't quite fully explained why some people can't be hypnotized. Of course, there's all sorts of neurological reasons that they've come up with. But if you look at this very basic principle that L. Ron Hubbard discovered many years ago, you will see, and agree with me, I'm sure, is it better to be suggestible and open to or affected easily by inflow? Or would it be better to have a balance where you, self-determined, can decide yourself what you want to start, change, and stop, and not be affected by those other things? I did talk in an earlier webinar about inner versus external or outer motivation. And certainly inner motivation is the key. Once you develop inner motivation, it is better. Not saying that external motivation or outer motivation is useful. It is a tool. It is something that can be used to suggest or give you the idea of doing something, but to operate in that as a permanent idea does create this robotism. I won't exercise unless someone else tells me. I won't do this unless there's some force acting against me. So you, in order to create your life, have to have this balance between inflow and outflow. Okay, so I'm going to check over here. Any questions on that at all? Does anyone need any expansion on that whole idea of inflow versus outflow? And of course, I'm really bringing it up because in the world that we live in today, in the amount of inflow that we are doing, the amount of suggestibility that comes up on your use of your device, no matter what it is, and even in your television now, if you're going to, let's say even Netflix these days has suggestions on what it is that you should watch. It even goes as far as this. When you are, let's take Netflix as an example, right? So you go to Netflix and you go and see what the top 10 films or shows are at the moment. Now, it's an interesting thing, and they did experiments on this, because other people have liked that thing. It's rated top 10. Who knows whether it actually is or not, right? Because those things have been rated as good, you're more likely to therefore go and see it. Who knows what level of manipulation or incorrect actual information that they're giving. They might just put something in the number 1 position, and you're immediately going to think that a lot of people have been watching that. Anyway, there was an experiment that was done to kind of illustrate this point, and they call it, it's in relation to you being able to explain something. And there was an experiment done where there was a situation given to a group of people, and they said, scientists, so there's this thing as a glowing rock. Now, if people were asked to rate how well they could explain the phenomena of why the rock glowed, they would rate their ability to explain how the rock was glowing would be higher if they were told that scientists did already know what the phenomena was caused by. Whereas if they were told that it was uncertain or scientists didn't know, I can't remember the exactness of that, but if they were told that they didn't know, then their ability to explain it was much lower. So this idea of conferred or contagious understanding or contagious suggestibility is part of how we are as humans. People go where people go because people go where people go. That's kind of how it works. People will take suggestions from something that's already had a lot of suggestions or likes on something, because that's what people do. We gravitate toward, you could say, the herd or the flock, if you like to say. All right, so I'm just going to check over here on Zoom if there's anything else, any questions or anything else that has come along. I would like to hear from you. Otherwise, what I think that we should have is that we should have the ability to review things even when we haven't got any experience with them. We don't know anything about them. So here I am getting all these suggestions. I'm inflowing all these things. I think it's valid that we should get the opportunity, if I've never bought a product or I don't know anything about it at all, for me to review it. But hang on, there is something like that. It's called social media. So take everything that you see or read on social media with a grain of salt. Understand this principle of inflow versus outflow. Understand that suggestibility in the way that it affects you combined with inflow can certainly reduce your ability to determine your own actions, reduce your ability to start, change, and stop your body, your actions, and your environment. And go ahead and take in more of the knowledge of Scientology through the fundamentals of thought, which will explain a lot more about these different principles of inflow versus outflow and a lot of other things. Or you can read something that will give you a full description of the subconscious mind, that L. Ron Hubbard termed the reactive mind, that will allow you to understand a huge amount on what is happening with your mind and how you are able to do certain things to get your mind under your control and have more awareness, not more suggestibility, more awareness of how you are in control of your life and therefore can get motivated and get things done. So, right now we will have a link that will appear in the comment sections or in the Zoom chat here. I'm going to take up one more thing before I go. That will come from Michelle. So if any of you would like to buy a book, or you would like to actually speak to one of our staff because you have personal issues with motivation and you'd like to find out more about if any of the other books might be more appropriate, there's no obligation at all, but there should be a link that will appear there for you to be able to register for that. So books or registration for a consultation, go ahead, do that. I hope what you've heard me say this evening has been interesting, that it has gotten you to want to take a look a bit further. I have said also that the body of knowledge in Scientology is so broad yet codified. It covers everything and has almost every solution to the problem that you have is contained within it. compare that to the breadth of information that is out there, a multitude of different concepts that aren't necessarily related to each other, that give you one perhaps concept that might be true, might be fantastic, but how it relates to the rest of life can often be really, really confusing. Well, the writings of L. Ron Hubbard handle that phenomena for good because he relates everything to every other part of life. Okay, so the link is there now, and I have a request which is interesting from someone here on Zoom, and I would like to know from the rest of you what you think of this, so we might go ahead with it. Would it be really cool to have a webinar just about the spiritual being? So not necessarily about the tools, but about the spiritual being. So I'd like to hear from the rest of you on the other platforms. If you would like that, give us a thumbs up. Say, yes, webinar on spiritual being would be cool. I would definitely like to share the information that L. Ron Hubbard has written about in regard to that subject. We definitely are going to make our way through these, but I would like to also present what it is that you want to hear. So please let me know back. Give me a thumbs up, give me likes, give me all those things to let me know what you thought of the webinar today. And for now, I'll leave you with that link. It will stay on the page. Don't go away just yet if you haven't registered. Take your time, consider the information. But otherwise, for the content, Shanae for today. We'll see you on the next webinar.